This is the country of Kuka, a place currently ruled by the king. But there is no crown prince or queen to inherit the throne. He has only one 15-year-old daughter, Princess Yona, because it is a small country. It is often eyed by surrounding nations, so frequent wars are inevitable. However, by some miracle, for the past 10 years since the former king passed away, the country has been completely peaceful. Princess Yona was supposed to attend the king's ceremony, but she chose not to because she hadn't yet found a suitable outfit she liked, and so the ceremony ended without her. Yona was always concerned about her hair. Even though her father thought she was very beautiful, she couldn't understand why her hair was so curly and blazing red. One of the 5 generals, Hak, came and mocked her hair. The reason Hak was confident enough to tease the princess was because he and Princess Yona had been childhood friends. Hak informed Yona that Su-won was coming soon. Upon hearing the news, the princess quickly ran off. Su-won was also a childhood friend of Yona. Even though he was 3 years older than her, she later met Su-won after many years, and he planned to stay for a week to celebrate Yona's birthday. Su-won then ran off to greet the king. While Yona remained a bit sulky because Su-won still treated her like a child. In the past, Yona often felt sad about the death of her mother, so Su-won had decided to take on the role of a mother figure for Yona, which is why she always considered Su-won an important person in her heart. The next day, Yona ran off to find Su-won and heard that he was having an archery match with Hak. She went to the match to watch and decided she wanted to learn archery from Su-won. However, the king had no intention of letting his daughter touch weapons. But then, Su-won unexpectedly invited Yona to go horseback riding with him, and she agreed and ran down. Hak helped Yona onto the horse, and Yona noticed that Su-won seemed quite familiar with being gentle toward women, so he must have had quite a few girls paying attention to him. Indeed, Su-won had received many marriage proposals, but had never accepted any of them. Yona didn't want to seem childish, so she boasted that she had already accepted a marriage proposal from Hak. Hak was bewildered, not understanding what was going on. Su-won congratulated the two, which made Yona wonder why he believed that lie. Yona later talked with her father and realized that he did not support her being with Su-won. Although Su-won was indeed talented and was also the son of his older brother, the previous king, meaning he carried royal blood, the king still refused to let Su-won become king by marrying Yona. He admitted that he truly was a coward, but he would not let Yona suffer the same fate of being harmed by wicked people like her mother had been. Yona then angrily stormed off and was suddenly approached by a shady figure. She feared this might be the one planning to harm her, as her father had said, so she ran away, but the person chased her. Yona was then found by Su-won, and she told him what had happened, but Su-won didn't see anyone outside. Seeing that Yona was very uneasy, he wanted to take her to Hak, thinking the two were engaged, but Yona honestly confessed her true feelings, that she only had feelings for Su-won. Su-won tried to keep his distance and admitted he was struggling to see Yona as a young woman. He knew he had to stop seeing her as a child, and at that moment, all Yona needed was that recognition from Su-won. She didn't know much about the affairs of the country or what it meant to be a king, but what she did know was that she still loved Su-won deeply. 5 days later, Yona's birthday party was held. Su-won pulled Yona aside to give her a hairpin. She thought her hair didn't suit such a thing, but Su-won said he liked her hair, which made her, for the first time, feel fond of her hair. Hak then interrupted the two, and Yona decided to return to her room to rest. Hak informed Su-won that he felt something had infiltrated the palace. When he found out Yona had also had an incident earlier, he asked Su-won to keep an eye on her while he increased the palace's security. That night, Yona wanted to go see her father to talk about Su-won. But when she arrived, she realized her father's chamber was not locked, and there were no guards standing watch. As she stepped inside, she was utterly shocked to discover that Su-won had murdered her father. At that time, Hak was on guard duty and encountered Min-su, one of the king's personal guards. The two talked for a while about Yona and Su-won. Meanwhile, Yona was being taken out for execution when Hak suddenly arrived and rescued her. Hak wanted to know what was going on and demanded an explanation from Su-won. Going back a bit, Yona still couldn't believe that Su-won was the one who killed her father. But Su-won had been waiting a long time for this moment. The soldiers on Su-won's side knew that not many people were aware of the situation yet, and that they only needed to keep an eye on Hak. However, Hak discovered them and demanded they explain themselves. When the enemies drew their swords, Hak didn't bother asking further questions. At that moment, Su-won explained to Yona that her father had always been regarded as a coward who feared war. But because of that, he had become a kind and benevolent king. 10 years ago, the previous king, instead of passing the throne to his eldest son, Su-won's father chose instead to pass it to Yona's father. Su-won's father had no desire for the throne and was even willing to fight on the front lines to protect his younger brother. Yet Yona's father was the one who killed Su-won's father. For that reason, Su-won was determined to take revenge. From the beginning, Su-won had no intention of harming Yona, knowing she rarely visited her father's chambers. Just then, a man named Kai appeared and, realizing Su-won had completed his task and that Yona had seen everything, wanted to kill Yona to silence her. She then knocked over a candle, setting the room on fire, which forced the soldiers and Kai to put out the flames. Taking that chance, she escaped. Yona still couldn't accept the truth about Su-won, but she was quickly captured again, only to be rescued by Hak shortly after. Originally, Hak didn't want to be the third wheel between Su-won and Yona, but he had grown suspicious after seeing many unfamiliar faces among the royal guards, so he asked Su-won about the whole situation. Yona was very happy that Hak still stood by her, because he had received orders from the king to protect the princess at all costs. Hak then asked where the king was and learned that Su-won had murdered him. Enraged, Hak charged at Su-won and demanded answers. He wanted to know why Su-won would kill a king who despised war, especially when he knew Su-won had never desired the throne. But Su-won believed that this country didn't need a weak king. Kai knew exactly who Hak was and how strong he was. But since Yona had been taken hostage, Hak was forced to drop his weapon. Hak was then surrounded. But suddenly, an arrow flew in and helped him break free to escape with Yona. They then reunited with Min-su, who had fired the arrow. Hak entrusted Yona to Min-su and went ahead to clear the way. The three of them found a hiding place, but couldn't find a way to escape because there were too many guards. Min-su decided to create a distraction to help the other two flee. Since Min-su had not revealed his loyalty to Yona, he wouldn't be targeted even if he was discovered. Min-su then put on the princess's cloak and ran outside. Hak used the opportunity while the guards were distracted by Min-su to escape the stronghold with Yona. Min-su wasn't so lucky and was struck down by the archers. The two then fled into the forest, and Su-won sent soldiers to patrol the area. Even though Su-won knew there was a high chance the soldiers wouldn't find anything, since Hak knew the forest better than anyone, he still had to try. Hak then let the princess sleep in the forest, and the next morning, the citizens began to notice changes within the country. Su-won still hadn't received any word from the soldiers. Meanwhile, Hak and Yona decided to leave. Hak believed that as long as Yona was alive, they could go anywhere. Yona also hoped Hak would always stay by her side, and Hak embraced her to help her feel better. The two would go on to have many encounters, recruiting talented individuals to return and reclaim the country, and this is the story of that journey. After several days in the forest, Hak noticed that Yona was growing weaker, as she had never endured hardship or pain before. Many years ago, Hak was the grandson of a general and had caught the king's attention, who invited him to become a general in the future. But Hak had refused because he didn't want to get involved with the royal family or the nobility, as he disliked their scheming and how they dragged each other down. Besides, he didn't want to be near Yona either, because every time he got close to her, he would lose his composure. And just when he was trying to avoid her, Yona came to hide behind him, as she had just been toyed with by someone named T-jun, the son of the Fire Tribe's chieftain. At that moment, Hak also realized that Yona liked Su-won, although she believed it was one-sided and didn't want to tell anyone else. Hak then left and wanted his grandfather to take him back, but his grandfather wasn't ready to do so yet, giving Yona the chance to come find Hak. She apologized for making Hak angry because of her cowardice and gave him some fruit to restore their friendship, then left. Hak then overheard the soldiers discussing how the king was currently causing his own power to be restricted. But right after that, he saw Tae-jun bothering the princess and even going too far, so he had to step in to protect her. Hak acted as though he was very close to Yona to make Tae-jun give up his intentions. He also decided to become Yona's bodyguard and revealed that he was the successor of the Wind tribe. The king then arrived to settle the matter and believed Hak would be a good protector for Yona. From that moment, Hak also realized that this king was not cowardly at all, as he was willing to grab Tae-jun's sword to stop him, injuring his own hand in the process. Hak then remembered the time when the queen had just passed away. Both the king and Yona were devastated at that time. But because she wanted to be her father's support, Yona tried to stay strong. Soo-won and Hak also wanted to help Yona relieve her stress, so they played in the snow with her. And because of throwing too many snowballs, Yona ended up getting sick. She really wanted her father to visit her, but the royal physician said he was busy. Not long after, both Hak and Soo-won also got sick, so Hak's grandfather came to visit. Soo-won wanted to become a general like Hak's grandfather, while Hak revealed that he was just an orphan whom his grandfather had taken in and raised. Soo-won's father also came to visit, which made Yona feel even sadder since the king still hadn't come. Some people thought the king was afraid of catching the illness, and that's why he didn't visit even his daughter. But Hak said he respected the king, because even with personal matters, he never placed them above the matters of the country. Yona listened to Hak and didn't blame her father anymore. That night, Yona got hungry again, so Soo-won had someone bring her food, but the porridge brought in was quite bad. And then the king entered and admitted that he had personally made the porridge to make up for not coming earlier. Yona then tried to finish the whole bowl, because it was something her father had made with his own hands. Yona had once wished that Hak and Soo-won would always stay by her side, but now, when she woke up, only a cruel reality was facing her. The sky that the three of them used to look at together was no longer there. Hak then realized that Yona had recently become nothing more than a walking corpse. Not only had her physical strength declined, but her spirit was also exhausted. Because of that, Hak hated Soo-won more than anyone else for turning Yona into this. He then saw the hairpin that Soo-won had given Yona and decided to keep it. That night, Yona tried to look for the hairpin again, but Hak didn't take it out. Yona also tried to throw away the feelings she had for Soo-won, but it was impossible. She went out for a while and ended up encountering a venomous snake, so Hak had to follow her to protect her and get her out of the snake's den. He returned the hairpin because it seemed to be the one thing that gave Yona strength at that moment. The two of them then continued to stay in the forest. Yona noticed that Hak had been bitten by the snake, but he said such a small bite wouldn't bring him down. Yona didn't know where they should go now, since even going to a village might result in running into soldiers, so Hak had no choice but to head for his hometown. When they returned to the Wind tribe, the people there were surprised that Hak had come back. They didn't know about Yona and assumed she was the girl Hak had brought home as his lover. He asked everyone to prepare food for Yona and inquired about his grandfather's whereabouts. They told him the palace had issued a summons for the 5 former generals to gather for a meeting. So Hak realized that no one there knew yet about what had happened at the palace. At that time, the 5 generals had gathered, and the chieftain of the Fire tribe questioned Hak's grandfather, as rumors were spreading throughout the nation that Hak had killed the king and abducted the princess. At this moment, Soo-won stepped forward and still did not place any blame on Hak. However, regarding the king's assassination, Soo-won did not admit to it. Soo-won believed that currently, all 5 tribes needed to form an alliance to prevent outside enemies from attacking. The other tribe leaders all agreed to let Soo-won become the next king to rule the country. But Hak's grandfather gave no opinion, because he believed he was no longer a general Hak was. So if they wanted an opinion, they should summon Hak and ask him instead. Kai warned that if the old man didn't give his opinion, he might be charged with treason. In the past, he had treated Soo-won like his own grandchild, so now he would give no comment. But Soo-won announced that in 3 days, he would hold the coronation ceremony and would wait for him to attend. That afternoon, it was revealed that the Fire tribe's chief had also secretly supported Soo-won in taking the throne. Both of them knew Hak would not act rashly at this point in order to avoid affecting Yona. And the Fire tribe had also begun preparing their military forces to suppress the Wind tribe under Hak. At this time, Yona had regained consciousness and met a boy named Jan, who was like a younger brother to Hack. Jan asked Yona what her relationship with Hack was, and she said she saw Hack as a friend. The other boys then joked that Hack had been rejected since Yona didn't see him as her romantic partner. Hack then informed Yona of the identity he had created for her at the moment. After finishing their meal, Yona went for a walk outside and was greeted by an older woman. The woman had heard from Hack that Yona was a palace maid who couldn't do her job properly and had been dismissed. The woman promised to teach Yona how to work and assigned her to do laundry. Hack later came to help, and both of them discovered that the village stream had dried up. Hack sent people upstream to investigate, and then his grandfather also returned. He was very happy to see Yona again. A man named Heen, who had gone upstream to investigate, suddenly returned with a few wounds. Heen reported that the fire tribe had blocked the water upstream, preventing it from flowing down to the village. Hack's grandfather forbade the villagers from taking any action, as he knew the fire tribe was putting pressure on him because he hadn't yet agreed to let Su-1 take the throne. Hack's grandfather had already made up his mind that he would not let Su-1 ascend the throne, because if Hack were to appear again, he would surely be accused of killing the king. During this time, Taejun appeared once more and seemed quite bitter, believing that if Hack hadn't interfered in the past, he might have had a chance with Yona and become king. Yona was deep in thought when Jan came to call her for dinner, but suddenly collapsed. Hack and his grandfather then told Yona that Jan had been physically weak since childhood and often needed medicine. But at that very moment, they heard news that a merchant caravan had been attacked, which meant they would have no water or medicine. Everyone knew this was a trick by the fire tribe. However, Heen said he knew a doctor and would go get medicine for Jan. Hack allowed Heen to depart and ordered everyone not to provoke the fire tribe at this time, since their military strength was weaker, and the fire tribe now had the backing of the royal family, meaning they would be at a disadvantage. Hack then met Yona in private, and she asked herself what she could do at this point. Hack wanted her to continue living peacefully here, and he then went to meet his grandfather to discuss matters. Hack decided that his grandfather should go ahead and approve Su-1's coronation and reclaim his general's title, while Hack would leave the tribe so that the Wind tribe would no longer be targeted. Although he knew that doing so would officially label him as a traitor, he was willing to accept that. He also wanted his grandfather to let Yona stay here and live the most peaceful, ordinary life possible, but his grandfather refused to let his grandson live such a life. So Hack invoked the authority of the tribe leader to give the order. That night, Hack stopped by the weapon shop to pick up a few items and say goodbye to some familiar faces. Meanwhile, Heen returned with the medicine and managed to save Jan. Yona later met with the older woman again and visited the merchant caravan that had been attacked. She realized that she was dragging the kind people here into trouble, so she came to her own decision to leave this place. The next day, Yona went to look for Hack and found that he had already stopped by to say farewell to Jan. Jan burst into tears, and Yona rushed over to ask what was going on. She thanked Jan for everything in the past few days, and Jan realized that Yona was going to leave as well. Jan had just promised Hack that he would protect Yona, yet now Yona had already left. At that moment, Hack met his subordinates again at the village gate and said his goodbyes before departing. He also asked them to take care of Yona in his place. But Yona had come looking for Hack and decided that she would go with him. However, Hack refused and advised her to stay here and live a peaceful life from now on. But she chose to follow Hack. Hack told her that he was no longer her general, so if she wanted him to protect her, there would have to be compensation. Since she had nothing to offer him in return, he used that as a reason to pressure her into staying with the Wind tribe. Hack's grandfather then raised his bow. Seeing that Hack once again appeared to be disrespectful to Yona, in the end, Hack's grandfather had to accept that Yona would go with Hack. At this time, Taejun heard that someone had discovered the whereabouts of Hack and Yona, so he set out to find them. Meanwhile, Hack and Yona were following his grandfather's advice and searching for a priest. This person had once guided the previous king, but out of discontent with the path that king had taken, he withdrew from the world and isolated himself from humanity. The two arrived at a desolate mountain region. and Hak warned that this place wouldn't be comfortable to sleep in at night. So Yona decided she would sleep next to Hak to stay warm, but he warned that he couldn't guarantee she would sleep well. He then pulled Yona into hiding because he heard the footsteps of several enemies nearby. He then came face to face with Taejun's troops. Taejun hadn't expected to encounter them so soon here. But Hak told him that he was no longer a general, so everything he did now would have no effect on the Wind Tribe. Taejun then gave the order to attack, but Hak easily knocked back every enemy who came at him. When archers began firing from a distance, Hak had no choice but to grab Yona and run, slashing away every arrow flying toward them. Yona then stumbled, so Hak shielded her and took an arrow in her place, and then fled together with her. That afternoon, the two temporarily lost their pursuers, but Hak decided to come out and fight, leaving Yona behind to hide. Hak was soon surrounded by enemies, while Yona realized that the arrow that hit Hak was poisoned, and he would soon collapse. She didn't want to reveal herself because she feared getting in Hak's way. But then she decided she had to help him because if she kept relying on Hak to protect her, she might as well have stayed in the Wind Tribe. She then rushed out, knocked down the archer, and confronted Taejun. Taejun offered to bring her back and overthrow Suwon, but she asked why. If Taejun already knew the things Suwon had done, he still chose to support him and oppress the Wind Tribe. She said Taejun was a hypocrite and that she would never go with him. Taejun was shocked that the once weak princess had now grown strong, and Yona's hair now looked like flames burning him. Hak scolded her for running out here again. He tried to run toward Yona, but the poison was making his condition rapidly worse. He became dizzy and collapsed, but still fought back until he was slashed and pushed to the edge of a cliff. Hak then fell off but managed to cling to the edge. Yona rushed to save him, but Taejun grabbed her hair. Yona took his sword and cut off her own hair to break free and save Hak. Taejun did not allow his soldiers to harm Yona, so they could do nothing as she ran forward with a sword and rescued Hak. But she couldn't pull him up, and both of them fell off the cliff together. Taejun ordered his soldiers to search for them, but they all believed the two could not have survived the fall. That night, Taejun returned to see Suwon and handed over the strand of Yona's hair that he had managed to keep. Taejun reported everything about Yona and believed she was truly dead. Kai had only intended to capture Yona and bring her back, but now that things had turned out this way, Taejun asked Suwon to punish him for this mistake, but Suwon simply turned his head and walked away. Meanwhile, a stranger had unexpectedly found Hak and Yona in the forest. At the same time, Suwon's coronation day had arrived. Kai announced that Hak's grandfather and the newly appointed general had come to attend, and Suwon wished to go and meet them. Suwon remembered how, in the past, whenever he visited Yona, Hak would always be there waiting for him. Suwon had always respected Hak for his strength and had even wanted Hak to become his personal guard. So Hak had once suggested that Suwon marry Yona and become king, but Suwon had always been hesitant about that. Suwon already knew that if one day he were to ascend the throne, he would no longer be able to stay by Yona and Hak's side. But he believed that by casting those things away, he had become who he was now. During his coronation, Suwon looked back at the different tribes the Fire Tribe still served, but they always had their eyes on the throne. The Earth Tribe only served those in power. The Water Tribe were opportunists waiting for their chance, and the Wind Tribe had many elite warriors personally trained by Hak's grandfather, so he couldn't predict when they might rebel again. But Suwon had to unify all the tribes in order to fight against foreign enemies. Hak's grandfather asked Suwon how much he had sacrificed to obtain the throne, but Suwon said he would revive the kingdom and return it to its former glory. He didn't need gods, he needed the power of the people of this land, and if anyone stood in his way, he would find a way to subdue them. Hak's grandfather couldn't tell when Suwon had changed this much. As for Yona, she had now regained consciousness and met Yun, the one who had saved her and Hak. Yun said Hak was seriously injured after protecting her during the fall from the cliff. If treatment had been delayed any longer, Hak might have died. Yona then met another person, Iksu, who seemed a bit strange, and she wasn't sure if she should reveal her identity to them. But Iksu already knew who she was, and from Yun's words, Yona realized that Iksu was the priest living in seclusion whom Hak's grandfather had mentioned. Iksu said his role was to convey the words of the gods to the people. But Yun believed that it was precisely because of those vague divine words that Iksu had been expelled from the capital. Yona wanted to know more about this, which made Yun realize that despite having lived in the palace, she knew nothing. Yona then noticed Hak beginning to stir. But Yun came to check and said Hak was running a fever and they didn't have proper medicine to treat it, so it would take time for him to recover. Yun said he wasn't a pharmacist, so Yona shouldn't place too much hope in him, especially since she had never thanked anyone, not even Hak, who had risked his life to protect her. This was also the reason why Yun disliked royalty and nobles. But Iksu told Yona not to worry, because the god of death hadn't arrived yet. Later, the two went out for a walk, and Yona asked why Iksu had come to live here. Iksu said he was just going with the flow of life and believed everything had its own purpose. That night, Yona went to thank Yun for saving her life and also wanted to learn more about their story. Yun said he was just someone who looked after that clumsy priest. In the past, being a priest was a position even the king couldn't surpass. They were considered messengers of the gods, with the power to intervene in the country's governance, sometimes even igniting wars, and even had the right to depose the king if they angered the gods. But because of that, priests were like thorns in the eyes of the royal family. It was Su-won's father who expelled Iksu from the palace out of fear that Iksu would disrupt the previous king's reign. As for why Yun brought Iksu to such a remote place, it was because Iksu was too kind. Living in poor villages made Iksu constantly help others, often to the detriment of himself. That's why the two of them ended up living here. That night, Yona suddenly discovered that Hak was missing, so she ran out to look for him. She called out his name in the forest, and he finally returned. He had just gone to retrieve his sword. Yona cried because he didn't call her to go with him. Hak, having received so many injuries for her sake, said if he were to die, he wondered just how much she would cry. Yona didn't want Hak to leave her ever again, and as Hak moved in close, she bumped heads with him. Yona thought he was trying to check her temperature, so she offered her forehead, and he just played along. Realizing Yona still didn't have much experience with matters of love, Hak apologized for making her cut her hair, but she said she had never treasured it and didn't feel any regret. Even so, Hak noticed that she still hadn't thrown away that hairpin. The next day, Hak temporarily came to understand the situation and that they were staying at the priest's house. Yona later went to meet Iksu, and he asked her if she wanted to hear the guidance of the gods. Hak's grandfather had once told her to find Iksu to learn which path she should follow. But after everything that had happened, all she wanted now was to live peacefully with Hak. However, Iksu told her that she was the storm that would stir the entire country. Later, Yun and Hak arrived, and Iksu began to recite the words passed down from the gods that when the 4 dragons gather, the true king will reappear. Hak didn't really believe in such things, but the story still had to be told. It was said that the Crimson Dragon King, a dragon god who had turned into a human, became the first king who founded this nation. But he was later betrayed by humans and overthrown. The 4 dragons then came to save the Crimson Dragon King and wished to annihilate humanity. However, the Crimson Dragon King asked them to spare the humans, so the 4 dragons created 4 warriors to protect the Crimson Dragon King. One had claws that could tear through anything. One had eyes that could see through all things, one had legs that could leap to the heavens, and one had a strong, mighty body. These 4 warriors later founded the 4 tribes and served the king until his death. After that, the 4 warriors left their tribes and disappeared without a trace. Iksu believed that Yona's life was now in danger, so she needed more guards than just Hak. Since Hak couldn't protect her all on his own, she would need more companions. These would be the 4 dragon warriors. They might be legends, but the people who inherited their bloodline were real, so Yona should go and find them. The gods had shown her the way, and now she had to walk that path on her own. Iksu also believed that the fact Yona had survived so many disasters was the miracle of someone bearing a divine destiny. But when Hak carries all the burden, no one says anything. That night, Yona thought about it and considered throwing away the hairpin, but still couldn't bring herself to do it. Later, she met Hak again. and he wondered whether she truly wanted to follow the path Iksu had shown. But Yona had decided to go look for the dragon warriors, and she wanted Hack to teach her how to use a weapon because she didn't want to be a burden to him anymore. He agreed. If that was what she truly wished, Iksu then came with a request for the two of them. He wanted them to take Yun along on their journey. Yun later made Yona a new outfit and even agreed to cut her hair. Yona realized Yun really was a genius, since he seemed to know everything. Yun didn't want to boast, but said he could memorize any book after reading it just once. And the reason he had to study so much was to take care of Iksu. But Yun said he wouldn't do it for free and would charge her a fee. So Yona told him to send the bill to Hack's grandfather. Yun then realized that Hack's grandfather was a legendary hero on par with Su-won's father. But Yona only knew him as an old man who doted on children. Yun said he wanted to read books from around the world. But then Yona went to see Iksu and told him that she couldn't take Yun with her because Yun and Iksu were family, and she couldn't bear to separate them. However, Yun overheard and later went to confront Iksu about it. But Iksu told him that he didn't want to keep holding Yun back in this place. He wanted Yun to go and see the world. Besides, Iksu was confident he could live just fine without Yun. Yun then considered burning the medical book that Iksu had once brought back, but couldn't bring himself to do it. Hack came over to roast some fish, and Yun asked why Hack went so far to protect Yona while neglecting himself. Hack replied that he was only protecting the one who mattered most to him. Yun later went to the waterfall to think, and remembered many years ago, when he was living in a village belonging to the Fire Tribe. It was so poor that Yun had to steal daily just to eat. When he saw Iksu passing by, Yun attacked him to rob him, but unfortunately, Iksu had no possessions and even acted kindly, which led Yun to let him stay at his house that night. Later, Yun even applied medicine to the wounds he had caused Iksu. Afterward, Yun applied medicine to Iksu's wound, the very wound he himself had caused, which is why the next morning, Iksu gave Yun a sweet potato to eat to stave off hunger. Yun realized that Iksu had traded his own shoes for that potato and couldn't help but wonder why he was so kind. Iksu said there were all kinds of people out there, and that he rarely went to the capital. Yun deeply wanted to go to the capital to start a new life and find more books to study. Despite having a difficult life, Yun could read and always wished to learn more. Iksu promised he would help Yun fulfill that wish. He then introduced himself and said his job was to help the suffering, as directed by the gods. Afterward, he taught Yun how to make a pair of straw sandals, and Yun very much wanted to follow Iksu to keep learning. But Iksu eventually left, and Yun kept hoping for the day he would return. In the time that followed, Yun made a living using the straw sandals he had learned to craft, and one day, he met Iksu again. Iksu said he had searched for many books for Yun, but they had all been taken by others. He was disappointed in himself and had planned to visit Yun one last time before retreating from the world and distancing himself from people. However, Yun decided to follow him and take care of him. From that day on, the two were always together. Later, Iksu came to see Yun and gave him a pair of straw sandals he made himself. Though they were still terribly ugly, Yun had also made a pair to replace the ones Iksu was wearing. Iksu was then able to stand on his own despite stumbling, which made Yun realize that Iksu might be okay and able to take care of himself. Yun then decided to go with Yona if that was what Iksu wanted. Not long after, the group set off again, and Hack questioned all the luggage Yun was carrying. Yun showed it to Hack and said goodbye to Iksu. Yun promised to return soon, and Iksu promised to live well even if alone. Yun then went ahead to lead the way for Hack and Yona, while Hack seemed to have finally accepted that Yun would be part of the journey. Meanwhile, Su-won had just investigated some corrupt nobles and had Kai eliminate them. The weakness of Yona's father had caused many greedy people to rise, and Su-won needed to purge them all. He later saw a book about the story of the Crimson Dragon King and recalled some old memories. However, he believed that this country did not need a mythical king to revive it. At that time, Yona's group was still on the road, needing to cross the country to reach the border of the empire, as suggested by Iksu. Since the dragon warriors often lived nomadic lives, it was difficult to pinpoint their exact locations. However, there was a tribe said to guard the bloodline of the dragon warriors, living in seclusion on a mountain near the imperial border, so that village would be their first destination. Hack was always anxious whenever someone passed by Yona, afraid she might be recognized. But he was overthinking. It wasn't like just anyone could recognize her. She also wanted Hack not to worry too much about her, especially since he hadn't fully recovered yet. She wanted to see what the world outside the palace was like. The group then stopped at a village along the way to eat and rest. Hack went to buy some supplies and told Yun and Yona that if anything happened, they should run and regroup near the big tree. He then left and went to a weapon shop to buy a bow. There was also a knife there that would suit Yona for self-defense, but Hack didn't buy it because he believed he could protect her himself. Meanwhile, Yona heard that Su-1 had officially ascended the throne and was glad that Hack's grandfather and the Wind tribe still seemed safe. The shop owner then asked if Yona wanted anything else, but she had already left. Yun had to pay for the previous items and chased after her when he saw she looked a little shaken. The two of them then spotted some members of the Fire tribe ahead and hid in a corner, where they happened to run into Hack again. After hearing the situation, he decided they shouldn't stay here too long. On the way, the three of them overheard talk about changes in the country since the new king took over. First, taxes had become lighter, but the most bothersome thing was that Fire tribe soldiers were everywhere. Yun liked traveling through forests like this because there was no need to worry about the royal court's surveillance. Yona then asked Hack to teach her swordsmanship again, but he refused and asked whether she was ready to strike an enemy or at least cripple them to protect herself. But Yona had no such intentions. She only wanted to learn so that she could open a path of escape for herself if needed. So Hack gave her this bow and told her to stay behind him during battles to provide support. If they hadn't been in the middle of a journey, he would have made her shoot 200 arrows a day for training. At the same time, he also wanted her to reflect on why her father had never wanted her to touch weapons. Hack then let Yona practice by shooting at birds and rabbits, but after an entire hour of training, she hadn't hit anything. So Hack demonstrated for her. But when she asked how he did it, he couldn't explain it clearly because geniuses can't understand how it feels to lack talent. Yona thought Hack didn't know how to teach, but in reality, he knew that her only problem was lacking the physical strength to draw the bow. Once she overcame that issue, she would be able to learn archery on her own. After that, Yona diligently practiced shooting arrows to make them fly as straight as possible. Yun noticed that Yona was willing to practice even at night just to master it faster. And indeed, her technique had improved, though the cost was her hands becoming scraped from drawing the bow too much. Yun also knew a bit about archery, but he didn't use it because he believed it was not worth it for someone half-hearted to wield a weapon. When one takes up a weapon, they must be mentally prepared to take another's life. If you lack resolve or hesitate, the price will be steep. The reason Hack was still alive was because he never showed mercy to his enemies. The next day, the group continued their journey, and suddenly, Yona stopped by the roadside. She wanted to shoot a wild boar. She had come to understand that the moment you take up a weapon, you must have the mindset of seizing something from another. She knew her father wouldn't approve of this, but now she had to do it in order to survive. She fired an arrow at the boar, but missed, so Hack told Yun to go on ahead. He said Yona still lacked killing intent. She could shoot objects, but not living things. He wanted her to shoot at him while imagining he was her pursuer. He was confident he could dodge her arrows, so Yona fired. But when he told her to imagine him as Su-1, she shot an arrow that grazed his face. Hack realized that she still needed a bit more refinement. But more importantly, he wanted her not to worry too much about protecting him because protecting was his job, not hers. The two of them then continued on to find Yun. Suddenly, Yona noticed Yun's luggage had been left on the ground, and right after that, they were shouted at by unseen voices telling them to leave. But Hack swung his weapon, sweeping away the mist and revealing the mountain villagers. They noticed Yona's red hair and asked about her identity. She said that she came under the guidance of the priest and was searching for the 4 dragon warriors. They then revealed that their village was the White Dragon Village, the place that protected the descendants of the White Dragon. At this time, Yun was being held in a cage and hoped that Yona and Hack hadn't been captured like he had. But soon after, the two of them were also brought in, although they weren't actually being captured. Once Yona spoke up, they released Yun, and Hack explained that everyone had suddenly changed their attitude once they saw Yona's red hair. The old man apologized for being disrespectful to Yona's companions. Hack and Yun also noticed that the people here seemed to hold her red hair in high regard. They explained that Yona's red hair resembled that of the person whom the first white dragon once served, so they believed she might be the one they were searching for. Hack asked if everyone in the village was a descendant of the white dragon, and they said no, only one person in the village inherited the power left behind by the white dragon. That person then appeared. He had one arm much larger than normal, and the village elder had taken care of him all this time. However, he didn't know what it meant to possess this power if the master he was meant to serve hadn't appeared. There was no guarantee that the master of the white dragon would show up soon, it might even be generations later. So the village elder also advised the white dragon to find a wife soon, so he could pass down the white dragon bloodline. But for now, he had no intention of doing so. At that moment, the white dragon warrior became curious about what was happening in the village, and upon learning that there were outsiders, he showed himself, thinking they were invaders come to cause trouble in the village. The white dragon then appeared to drive away the intruders, while Yona took the knife she had borrowed from Hack to give herself a bit of courage before using every means she had to recruit the white dragon. However, seeing her holding a weapon only made the white dragon more convinced that she was an enemy, so he approached her. But when Yona's red hair became visible, the white dragon was stunned. The blood of the white dragon reacted within him, triggering a memory of his father's words from long ago, that the white dragon must use his strength to serve the descendant of the Crimson Dragon King. The white dragon had no idea when that person would appear, but his father believed that when the time came, the white dragon would instinctively recognize them, and that would mark the beginning of his journey. The white dragon then came to his senses and decided to accept Yona as his master, prompting everyone in the village to bow to her. Yun noticed that it seemed like Yona's red hair had led the white dragon to regard her as the Crimson Dragon King and choose her as his master. But Yona thought of herself not as a king, but merely a wretched person borrowing the strength of the four dragons. Still, regardless of who she was, the white dragon had chosen to serve her. His blood had proven that. The white dragon then informed the village elder that he would depart immediately. But the elder rushed over and insisted on holding a farewell banquet first. During the banquet, Yun was surprised that the white dragon had agreed to join so easily. Meanwhile, Hack decided to visit the white dragon to ask for a few supplies that might help with their upcoming journey. But instead, the white dragon handed Hack a pouch of money and said that Hack's duty was over, so he could return to his hometown. But Hack retorted that a pampered noble like the white dragon couldn't possibly protect the princess. The two of them then brought this antagonistic energy to their meeting with Yona. Hack claimed the white dragon was useless and that they should go find someone else. Yun asked what happened and learned that the white dragon had given Hack money. Hack hadn't agreed to leave outright, but he was still carrying the pouch with him. The white dragon argued that Hack wasn't one of the dragon warriors, so he wasn't needed. But Yona said she needed Hack and explained how important he was to her. That made the white dragon conclude that Hack must be so weak that they needed the dragon warriors to help protect the princess. But Hack countered that he wasn't so weak as to need help from a white lizard. That night, the banquet was held. The village elder, who had raised 4 generations of white dragons, now finally had the chance to witness the white dragon setting off to fulfill his mission. The next day, the white dragon departed with Yona's group, which surprised the entire village. The elder handed him a pile of supplies for the journey. Though their tribe's mission had now been fulfilled, the elder was saddened that she would no longer get to wake the white dragon each morning. She knew she was getting old, but she vowed to live long enough to see him return. The group then resumed their journey, though they had no clues about the remaining 3 dragon warriors. However, the white dragon revealed that he could sense the others through a kind of connection, even if he had never met them. Yona then asked for the white dragon's real name, and he was surprised that he would ever use the name his parents had given him again. That name was Kaiya. As the journey continued, Hack constantly provoked and mocked Kaiya, so Yona had to step in and stop the two. She asked Hack not to stir up trouble and told Kaya not to pay attention to Hack's behavior. Yun then asked Kaya about the location of the nearest dragon he could sense. Kaya focused and pointed in the direction he felt. He then wanted to go ahead to lead the way but promptly fell into a hole full of centipedes, proving once again that he was just a sheltered noble unused to the outside world. Yun told him to stay at the back of the group from now on. After being pulled out of the hole, both Kaya and Hack suddenly sensed the presence of multiple enemies around them. Yun and Yona hid nearby, and Hack suspected it might be the Fire Tribe, but it turned out they were just bandits, so neither Hack nor Kaya held back. The bandits still believed they could overwhelm them with numbers, but Kaya activated his dragon arm and charged in to attack. Hack was surprised by Kaya's strength, but he didn't want to be seen as incompetent either, so he also showed off his own power. Kaya was about to strike Hack for calling him a snake again. Though they openly disliked each other, the two had to admit that the other's combat abilities were no joke. Yona also wanted to help, so Yun guided her on how to aim and shoot, and she managed to drive off a bandit who was trying to ambush Hack. She hit her target and found Yun's instructions fairly easy to follow, but when Yun tried shooting himself, he failed, proving he was all theory and no real skill in practice. They eventually dealt with all the bandits, but Kaya's arm seemed to have used up too much energy, and Hack also lost consciousness due to his reopened wound. Kaya couldn't believe Hack had been fighting with such an injury. He then carried Hack, as his dragon arm gave him strength 10 times greater than a normal person's, but only the dragon arm was strong. His left arm was still as weak as any other. Kaya also realized that Yona was quite strong herself, as she didn't show any fear in front of the bandits and even wanted to protect Hack. She said that nothing could be scarier than that night she once experienced. Kaya realized that he truly wanted to follow this strong princess. That night, Kaya was surprised that the group only ate wild vegetables. Yona had no right to complain, since Yun's cooking was still better than Hack's. Hack had regained consciousness by then, and Yona wanted to feed him herself, but Kaya volunteered to do it instead. Yun asked Kaya about the location of the next dragon, the Blue Dragon. According to Kaya, the Blue Dragon clan had once lived within the Earth Tribe, but one day they suddenly disappeared. Even though they had vanished, Kaya could still sense the Blue Dragon's location, so he was confident that the Blue Dragon was still alive. Yun managed to roughly pinpoint the Blue Dragon's general location, so they decided to enter some nearby villages the next day to investigate. For now, Kaya was shocked that they would be sleeping in the forest. The next morning, Kaya looked lifeless from the lack of sleep, but Yun wanted everyone to pull themselves together since they might encounter the Fire Tribe, so they had to avoid drawing attention. However, one of them had bright red hair, one was a former general, and another had a dragon arm, so not drawing attention was the real challenge. Yun then came up with another plan. They arrived near the villages so that Kaya could try sensing the Blue Dragon, and if he felt nothing, they would leave immediately instead of wasting time searching. Thanks to Hack's good memory of locations, he pointed out a few areas that were military camps, so the Blue Dragon would likely not be there, helping reduce the number of places they needed to search. Even so, after an entire day of looking, they still hadn't found the Blue Dragon. Kaya kept pointing in the same direction he sensed the Blue Dragon, making the group wonder if the Blue Dragon might have crossed the border. Later, seeing Yona looking tired, Yun gave her a drink to ease her fatigue. That night, Kaya felt completely useless, thinking he hadn't been able to help the princess much at all and had only led them on a wild goose chase, draining their strength. He wished he could help the Blue Dragon sense him and come on his own. But the sound of Yona practicing archery at night woke Kaya up. Hack stopped Kaya and explained that although the princess had them to protect her, she still trained herself so she wouldn't be helpless if something happened. The next morning, Yona asked Kaya if he had slept well, knowing that he wasn't used to sleeping outdoors like this. Kaya gradually realized that he was starting to like Yona, and she saw him as someone irreplaceable. At that point, Yun discovered that the Blue Dragon was likely hiding in a blind spot on the map, a location likely chosen near the border so no one could find them. The group finally reached a hidden village near the border of the empire. Upon arrival, the villagers came out to see their faces. Kaya confirmed that the blue dragon was in this village, but the people here were not the Blue Dragon clan, just a poor, unknown tribe. Yona didn't want to pressure the villagers, so she simply asked if they could stay for one night to let Hack recover from his wounds. The village elder agreed to let them stay and warned them that the place was like a maze, so they should avoid wandering around without a guide to prevent getting lost. When Yona asked why the villagers wore masks, the elder explained that it was a custom for those who were not yet married. The group was then led to their resting quarters, but Yun decided he would go explore the area to look for the blue dragon. The whole group then explored the village, but only found dead ends. Yun suddenly felt like someone was watching him, so he became worried they had been discovered by the villagers and decided to have the group retreat. But on the way back, Yona unexpectedly discovered a secret tunnel and entered it without telling Hack's group. She then went deeper inside and saw a squirrel. She got caught up in chasing after it and didn't realize she had become separated from the group. The lights suddenly went out, and she unexpectedly encountered a man. He promised to lead her out of there. But after walking for a while, Yona began to feel uneasy and tried to run away. Suddenly, a masked person appeared and rescued her. She realized this person was the owner of the squirrel. At this time, Hack's group was out searching for Yona, and she was returned to them. But Kaya recognized that the one who brought Yona back was the blue dragon. That man suddenly ran away without explanation. Many years ago, when the blue dragon was born, the villagers placed a mask on the child's face because the power of the blue dragon lay in his eyes. The villagers did not revere the blue dragon instead. They treated the blue dragon as a curse. From a young age, the current blue dragon lived with the previous blue dragon, and both were shunned by the entire village. The previous blue dragon didn't cherish the current one either. To him, the power that paralyzed anyone who made eye contact was nothing more than a curse, and that curse became even crueler when the villagers exaggerated it, making everyone too afraid to even come near them. And even if a blue dragon died, a new one would be born in this very village. The current blue dragon noticed that his own eyes were growing stronger, capable of seeing farther. While the previous blue dragon's eyesight gradually weakened, the two of them often protected the village from outside attackers. And the previous blue dragon wanted his successor to learn swordsmanship from him so that he could protect himself in the future. Though gruff and harsh, the previous blue dragon actually wanted his successor to live a decent life without suffering. That's why he told the current blue dragon not to use his eye power, as it was a double-edged sword. That was the reason he taught him to use a sword instead of relying on the ability. But after fighting for some time, the previous blue dragon completely lost his eyesight. However, he felt joy in finally being freed from the curse and being able to die as an ordinary person. The current blue dragon had added bells to his mask so that the former one, though blind, could locate him by sound. But not long after, the predecessor passed away, and a large group of enemies invaded the village. The current blue dragon, though he remembered the warning, still chose to protect the village and used his power to defeat all the enemies. Even though he tried to keep his distance from them, Yona still realized that the blue dragon was a warm-hearted person. At that moment, the blue dragon himself was feeling extremely unsettled, because when he saved Yona, the dragon blood inside him reacted fiercely to her, just like what had happened to Kaya earlier. But he didn't know what that reaction meant or who the voice inside his head belonged to. His blood boiled, and he couldn't understand how he immediately recognized that Kaya was the white dragon. The reason the blue dragon was hiding now was because he didn't want anyone to know about this power anymore. He believed it would only bring pain to others. Meanwhile, Kaya was furious that this village had dared to take Yona away. But Yun suspected that the white dragon's village might be the anomaly, and that the blue dragon and the people here viewed them as intruders. Still, Yona wanted to meet the blue dragon again, so she planned to go back into that tunnel one more time. Kaya and Yun were both going with her, so she insisted on going as well, but Hack wanted her to stay behind. Yona managed to persuade Hack and told him that he should be the one staying here to watch over the villagers, while she would go personally to bring the blue dragon over to their side. Hack made her promise to return safely otherwise. From now on, he'd follow her everywhere and make her annoyed. He then asked Kaya to guarantee Yona's safety and stayed behind to keep an eye on the villagers. He noticed that the villagers were still watching them closely, and he remained there to intimidate them so they wouldn't dare do anything harmful. When they reached the secret passage, Kaya sensed someone was tailing them, so he told Yun and Yona to go ahead. He then confronted the villagers and asked what they were planning to do. They said they couldn't allow anyone who entered that path to return, but Kaya declared that he was ready to fight if they intended to harm Yona. Meanwhile, Yun and Yona had already been spotted by the blue dragon. The two of them soon came to meet him, and Yona wanted to know what his name was, but he had no real name and even held a sword to threaten them. However, the blue dragon's squirrel clung affectionately to Yona, and the blue dragon suddenly felt a strong desire to meet her, even though he didn't know who she was. When she asked to borrow his power, he claimed that anyone who desired this power was his enemy, but she only wanted to meet him to invite him to be her friend. Still, the blue dragon believed this power should never be released into the world and drove Yona away. She couldn't force him, so she and Yun had no choice but to leave. Though the blue dragon had long wished for a friend, he had also long forced himself to abandon that desire. Yona accepted having to leave, but still felt bitter about the blue dragon's situation. She later found Kaya blocking the villagers, who wanted to attack Yona because she had learned about the curse. When she asked why they considered the blue dragon a curse, they gave no answer, so Kaya was forced to act. Just then, the entire cave began to shake and started collapsing. Kaya shielded Yona, while Hack, upon realizing what was happening, rushed to find her. However, the path was blocked by rocks, and Hack couldn't break through them to go deeper inside. He tried desperately to clear the rubble, and could only pray that the king would never bring his daughter along again. At that moment, Yona regained consciousness and saw that the villagers were still trapped in there with them. Yun worried that if they did nothing, they would run out of air to breathe. Kaya extended his claws to try to create an escape path, but the villagers became frightened upon seeing there were even more dragons. Yona wanted to know why they considered dragon power a curse, and they explained that in this village, there would always be one child born with the blue dragon's mark. Even if that child died, another would be born bearing it. That fact terrified the villagers, who feared their own child might one day become that curse. The reason they feared the power instead of coveting it was because the blue dragon had shown that even as a child, he could slaughter many soldiers using that power. That was why they isolated the blue dragon within the village to prevent him from taking that power out into the world to wreak destruction. The blue dragon then appeared, and the villagers began to fear that he would punish them. But he did nothing and instead had his mask knocked off. Yona saw that his face was very gentle, but the villagers believed that looking into the blue dragon's eyes would turn them to stone, so he had to put the mask back on. He then picked up an axe and moved forward, not to attack, but to find a way to break through the rocks and escape. He told Kaya that the side he was working on would connect to the outside faster, so Kaya helped him. Yona also joined in, and Yun asked the villagers if they wanted to live and get out of there. Hack, digging from the other side, encountered villagers who had come to rescue their son trapped on the other side of the path, but he told them to prepare an explanation for him. After digging for a while, Yona became exhausted, so the blue dragon, following Kaya's suggestion, carried her to rest. Yona continued to see how gentle the blue dragon truly was and later shared her story with him, how she had to face many things after 15 years of never leaving the palace. She believed that everything she had gone through was her living proof. She then decided to get back to work, and the blue dragon began to realize that perhaps he could be free if he stayed by Yona's side. They resumed digging, and Hack eventually broke through the wall from the other side. As soon as he saw Yona again, he rushed to hug her and hoped she would never go through anything like that again. When they left the cave, Yona once again invited the blue dragon to come with her, now fully aware that going with her meant gaining the freedom he had always wanted. The blue dragon chose to follow Yona and set off with the group. But suddenly, the bell on his mask fell off, and the blue dragon decided to leave it behind, as if shedding everything that had happened in that village to begin a new life. Even though he had joined Yona's group, the blue dragon still acted rather distant. Kaya could no longer sense the direction of the two remaining dragons and was also exhausted from overusing his power the night before. Yun asked the blue dragon if he could sense like Kaya did, but the blue dragon was unable to. Kaya believed that the blue dragon lacked experience, so he offered to teach him. However, the blue dragon suddenly ran off. In truth, he had only gone to a nearby stream to catch fish for Kaya to help him recover, but he also got cold afterward. So the group decided to light a fire to both cook and stay warm. Once Yun finished cooking, they let the blue dragon try the food, and he surprised everyone by opening his mouth to thank Yona. What shocked them even more was that, while everyone else called her princess, the blue dragon called her by name. At that moment, they all agreed the blue dragon needed a name. That night, Yona asked Yun for suggestions, but Yun told her that since she was the one who had freed the blue dragon from his lonely cage, she should be the one to give him a name, especially since it was clear that the blue dragon held her dear, and she had shown no fear even when he once pointed his sword at her. Yun also admitted that he used to look at Yona with disdain, having always hated nobles and royalty. Now, Yun wanted to call her by her name rather than princess, like before. Later, Yona went to the stream to fetch water and met Hack. She told him to continue calling her princess rather than by name, because she wanted him to be the only one who preserved the memory that she had once been a princess and the daughter of the king. Hack agreed and told her what he was thinking at the time he was digging through the rocks to save her. Yona then asked Hack to help her come up with a name for the blue dragon. He felt that the blue dragon had a strong connection to the night, and when they saw him immersed in moonlight, Yona decided to name him Shin. The blue dragon accepted the name and seemed to like it. Shin then whispered to his predecessor that, after all this time, he had finally been given a name and would treasure it no matter what. The next morning, Yona woke up and asked Kaya how he was feeling. He said he could now sense the location of the green dragon. The group then continued their journey based on the direction Kaya had identified. Since their destination was quite close to the capital, Shin's long-range vision proved useful. Thanks to his ability to observe the road ahead, they could safely choose their path without fear of being discovered by enemies. Kaya also seemed happy to have made a new friend in Shin. On their way, they passed through an abandoned village inhabited only by starving people. It was a place hit by famine with no drinking water. Most of the village's men had been sent to the capital to serve as soldiers, so the area had essentially been forsaken by the nation. Disease spread, and those too weak to migrate were left with no choice but to starve to death. The place was similar to where Yun had once lived, as the Fire Tribe's chief had focused only on strengthening the military while neglecting the lives of the people. The group later helped a man on the road, who said that the previous king had been a terrible ruler who failed to govern the country, leading to the scattering of the tribes and causing suffering among the people without doing anything to help. He hoped the new king would be a better one. When the group moved on, Yona excused herself to go to the bathroom, using it as an excuse to be alone. Yun also admitted that he had never respected the former king and that the whole world would likely remember him as a foolish king who naively dreamed of a world without weapons or conflict. Even so, Hack still saw him as someone he would always respect. And now, Yona had nothing left but the pride of being that king's daughter. She sat nearby and cried, but Shin's squirrel came to comfort her and helped lift her spirits. That night, she woke again to practice archery, determined to become stronger so she wouldn't lose the people she cherished. Meanwhile, Su-won set off to the region of the Earth Tribe. The tribe chief was feeling disheartened because the Earth Tribe had become dull lately, with few merchants visiting and dwindling resources. He felt he had grown weaker ever since Yona's father had ascended the throne and ended the wars. Upon hearing that Su-won had come to visit, he went out to greet him. He still kept a close eye on Su-won, as he was the son of the man the tribe chief had once revered like a mentor. Su-won asked to come inside for tea. With him was the Sky Tribe's chief, and these two tribe leaders were infamous for being as different as night and day. So the moment they laid eyes on each other, they were ready to fight. The chief of the Earth Tribe noticed that Su-won still looked somewhat delicate and untrustworthy, unlike a warrior like his father had been in the past. So the Earth Tribe chief wanted to see how capable Su-won truly was. Su-won then asked to go on a tour. And during that time, the Earth Tribe chief was surprised to hear that the mine had collapsed again. The chief's attendant also asked Su-won why he had come today, since he certainly wouldn't be here without a reason. But Su-won only replied that he had come for sightseeing, which prompted the Earth Tribe chief to speak frankly. He reminded Su-won of his previous promise to revive the country, but from his view, Su-won didn't seem trustworthy enough to fulfill that. And if he ever came to believe that Su-won would only bring ruin to the nation, he himself might be the one to lead a rebellion. Of course, Su-won understood this and did not reprimand him for the statement, because he had sworn to fulfill his promise. The group then continued the tour, and Su-won became curious about why they worshipped a rock there. When he asked about it, the chief said it was simply a belief, nothing profound. He then excused himself and told Su-won to ask his servant if he needed anything. The servant told Su-won not to take the chief's words too personally, explaining that the chief was simply too disheartened and had lost his sense of purpose in times of peace, and his frustration also came from being unable to protect the country. Su-won admitted that the Earth Tribe chief was a dignified man, admired by many, which gave Su-won an idea. Shortly after, the servant came running to report to the chief that a battle was about to happen. Overjoyed, the chief ran to meet Su-won, only to learn that it was just a mock battle. Specifically, Su-won wanted to create a festival and invite the people to participate. The Earth and Sky Tribe chiefs both opposed the idea, arguing that Su-won was ignoring the country's situation to hold festivities, and they worried he might end up worse than the previous king. Not long after, the festival was held. The Earth Tribe chief found the outfit Su-won had gifted him to be quite cumbersome and didn't like it, but his wife had personally chosen it, so he had no choice but to wear it. At this point, he also found out that his wife had become good friends with Su-won after Su-won expressed how much he liked the tea she made. The chief then saw how the people eagerly waited for him to perform and wondered if this event was really meaningful. Su-won then explained the rules. He would lead a team to battle against the chief's side. Each participant would wear a bowl on their head, and breaking someone's bowl would earn points based on their social class. Each side's soldiers would be divided into 3 classes: commoners, nobles, and king. Members of the same class could fight each other freely, but there were restrictions between classes. The king could break a noble's bowl, but not a commoner's. Nobles could hit commoners, but not the king. And commoners could target the king, but not nobles. Anyone whose bowl was broken would become a prisoner. But if a teammate gave them a spare bowl, they could return to the game. The side that lost all their bowls would be the loser. The Earth Tribe chief wasn't sure whether Su-won could actually fight, even though he was a friend of the famous hack, since no one knew about Su-won's true strength. The Sky Tribe chief remarked that the Earth Tribe chief was too focused on fierce warriors and overlooked people like Su-won. When he stepped onto the field, the Earth Tribe chief saw that Su-won truly looked like nothing more than a frail little squirrel. Yet Su-won boldly stepped forward to challenge him. The chief accepted, but suddenly, Su-won turned and ran away, sending his soldiers out first. These 5 soldiers were actually Earth Tribe members who had been forcibly reassigned to Su-won's team just to make up the numbers. They wanted to let the chief win, but doing so would only damage his honor. So they chose to follow his command and fight with everything they had. Meanwhile, the chief couldn't counterattack. Since they were commoners, a noble had to step in to assist the chief, but was then taken down by another noble. Once facing nobles, however, the chief could strike freely and began knocking them down one by one. As he roamed the battlefield looking for opponents, Su-won was being chased around by commoners from the chief's team. The Earth Tribe chief then encountered the Sky Tribe chief since the latter was a noble. The Earth chief had the advantage, though the Sky chief was still allowed to defend himself, as long as his bowl wasn't broken. At that moment, Su-won managed to dodge the 5 commoners chasing him, causing them to accidentally break each other's bowls. He then ran over to rescue the prisoners, prompting the Earth Tribe chief to charge at him. But Su-won knocked away a flying wooden sword that landed right in front of the chief's face. At that point, the chief realized that Su-won was no ordinary man. He had simply been hiding his true strength by pretending to be lucky. Su-won successfully rescued the prisoners, though doing so would bring both disadvantage and advantage. the advantage being that he now had more troops, but the disadvantage being that the opposing side could gain more points by breaking their bowls again. Su-won was once again pursued, making the chief still unsure whether Su-won was truly skilled. But shortly after, a gust of wind blew in, kicking up smoke and dust that split the chief's formation apart. He then asked his tribe members who had joined Su-won's team about who taught them such tactics, and they revealed that it was all Su-won's strategy, including predicting the wind. The chief finally realized he had misjudged Su-won, understanding now that Su-won was intentionally leading his forces into defeat, while also choosing the most obedient people from his tribe as his soldiers. The Earth tribe's forces were eventually defeated, leaving only the chief surrounded. He saw that the squirrel he had perceived earlier now looked like a hawk eyeing its prey. Su-won then offered him a chance to revive his troops and continue the battle to preserve his honor. But the chief refused, saying that if this were a real battlefield, no soldiers would be revived, and even if he stood alone against 1,000 enemies, he would still fight. He then battled with Su-won, but as Su-won fought fiercely, he tripped, giving the chief the chance to break the bowl on his head, which allowed the chief a chance to turn the tide of the match on his own. A few days later, the chief still didn't know why Su-won had come, until his wife suddenly informed him that the tea she made had been purchased by merchants and introduced to major countries, meaning the amount of tea in their fields would no longer be enough to supply demand. However, Su-won suggested that the more rare something was, the more valuable it became, so she should preserve it as a regional specialty. An old man at the mine also reported that the mine now needed to be expanded, but there weren't enough workers for extraction. The stones they had once considered worthless had, in the hands of craftsmen, been turned into the very jewelry the chief had worn during the festival. Seeing that the issues in the region had been resolved, Su-won decided to leave. By the time the chief realized everything Su-won had done, Su-won was already gone. Su-won's goal was to recruit the Earth tribe because their morale was strong, and if war broke out, their military strength would be crucial. The chief now felt he had truly not misjudged Su-won and decided to place his hopes in him, even seeing Su-won as someone with more potential than his father. Meanwhile, Yona's group had reached the port city, which Yun believed was where the Ryuu dragon was hiding. Hak had been there before, while Kaiya was exhausted, and the group as a whole had drawn too much attention, so Hak decided to go investigate the city alone. When Yona offered to come along, Hak stopped her because he noticed she hadn't been sleeping well recently and wanted her to stay and rest. He handed his weapons to Yun for safekeeping and entered the city alone. Once there, Hak found the place more lifeless than before. A few soldiers, origin unknown, were bullying the townspeople, and feeling indignant, Hak and a green-haired young man appeared to intervene. The two then helped the girl flee and fought back against the soldiers before finally losing them. The green-haired man suddenly handed the girl over to Hak and quickly left, seemingly for something urgent. He then returned to a ship at the port and reunited with the captain. She knew he had once again picked a fight with soldiers, but he had also sensed the presence of the white dragon and blue dragon nearby. That night, Hak returned, and the group decided to enter the city the next day to shop. Meanwhile, Shin-Ah and Kaiya had already realized that the Ryuu dragon was on a ship anchored offshore. The next day, Shin-Ah and Kaiya guided the group to find the Ryuu dragon, while Hak suddenly chose to go off on his own, deliberately separating from the others since he had not told them about his earlier encounter with the soldiers and didn't want the group to get into trouble. Yun also sensed that something was strange, as Hak was always by Yona's side like a shadow. But when Kaiya led the group to the ship where they had sensed the presence of the Ryuu dragon, that presence suddenly vanished. At that moment, the Ryuu dragon had reunited with Hak in the city. The Ryuu dragon explained that he was being followed by some people and wanted Hak's help for a bit. He brought Hak to a tavern to talk, and when Hak asked why the port city had become so lifeless, the Ryuu dragon revealed that the place had changed since a certain lord came into power and began exploiting the people. Being a free-spirited man, he intended to fight back. Yun and Yona unexpectedly arrived and spotted Hak, forcing him to explain the situation. but the Ryuu dragon had already slipped away. Hack tried to explain to Yona while the Ryuu dragon left because he sensed both the white dragon and a presence that left him feeling conflicted. He had never liked believing in the mission to protect his master and didn't want to be bound by it. So he kept trying to run away from it. Meanwhile, Hack had to lead the group in fleeing from the soldiers and ended up meeting again with the girl he and the Ryuu dragon had saved the day before. She brought the group to her workplace, and Hack explained everything he had gone through, including how the city was ruled by a corrupt lord whose soldiers used his power to bully the townspeople. They destroyed shops, kidnapped beautiful women, and demanded outrageously high taxes from anyone wanting to do business. That was why the port city's commerce had all but collapsed. Yona now understood why the smiles of the townspeople seemed so fake. When Yun asked about pirates, the girl revealed that the pirates had never harmed the locals, as they only stole goods from the lord's ships. That night, the Ryuu dragon snuck onto one of the lord's cargo ships and discovered it was being used to smuggle drugs. His entire ship crew then appeared and launched an attack on the cargo ship. According to the story that was passed around, the Ryuu dragon's special ability was his legs, which allowed him to leap extremely high. The pirate ship claimed victory, and the captain ordered the lord's cargo ship to be burned. The captain forbade her crew from killing people, which meant they always had to ensure they held an overwhelming advantage if they wanted a mission to succeed. Later, the captain noticed that the Ryuu dragon was unusually quiet. He admitted that he was still thinking about how good it felt to fight alongside Hack the night before. Everyone knew about his powers, but no one hated him for it. He also truly treasured the people on this ship, because 13 years ago, he had left his village in search of freedom and had ended up here. The captain was currently trying to recruit more capable people to launch a full-scale attack and overthrow the corrupt lord. She needed as much strength as possible because she didn't want the people she considered her children to die. Since she knew the Ryuu dragon had met Hack, she wanted him to bring Hack back. The Ryuu dragon knew he would have to find a way to persuade Hack. Knowing that Hack was currently serving someone, the next day, the Ryuu dragon returned to town to find Hack again. While Hack and the group were also searching for the Ryuu dragon, they witnessed soldiers attacking the townspeople nearby, but couldn't intervene. So Yun pulled the group into a corner and explained that the soldiers had gone mad because pirates had stolen their cargo the night before. If they acted now, they'd only draw more attention. Once the soldiers left, the group moved on. Hack then suddenly separated from the group again, as he was now a wanted man in the city. The Ryuu dragon, seeing this, thought it would make Hack easier to recruit. Hack later met the Ryuu dragon again and found out that he too was now wanted. Just like Hack, the two burned their wanted posters, and the Ryuu dragon began trying to recruit Hack. But Hack thought the guy seemed like some kind of perverted creep, so he refused and punched him to chase him off. But the Ryuu dragon stood up again and lunged at him, forcing Hack to run away. Hack then rejoined Yona's group, while the Ryuu dragon once again slipped away. Even though he knew Hack already had a master, the Ryuu dragon was still determined to lure him to his side. He later accidentally fell and was spotted by Kai-Ya. Meanwhile, Yona's group had returned to the shop that had been attacked by soldiers earlier, only to discover that a child in the family had been killed by the soldiers. Yun went to check on the child's condition, but it was already too late to save him. Yona was anguished for not stepping in sooner to prevent this. She then resolved that if this place had been in chaos since her father's time, then it was her duty to restore order to it. At this time, Kai-Ya had already heard Jiha's story, and Jiha himself was currently stuck inside a jar, so Kai-Ya carried the jar along with him. However, when Jiha heard that he was going to meet the master he was supposed to serve, he smashed the jar and escaped, claiming that he still had many things he wanted to do and had no intention of helping or serving anyone. Jiha then left and once again found Hack, introducing himself and again inviting Hack to join him. But Hack kept refusing. When Yona showed up, Jiha suddenly knelt down, feeling the blood inside him boiling. He realized that this was the very master he needed to avoid, but at the same time, he found himself unable to leave her side and could not move his body. Yona sensed that he was indeed the Ryuu dragon, and Kai-Ya soon arrived to confirm it. Ji-ha realized he could not underestimate the bond between the 4 dragons and the Crimson Dragon King. However, Ji-ha directly stated that he had no intention of becoming her subordinate. But Yona replied that she wasn't trying to force him, only to ask for his strength, and if he refused, she wouldn't press him further. When she learned that Ji-ha was a pirate, she asked to meet his captain so that they could join forces in fighting against the local lord, as she was furious over what had happened in this land. So Ji-ha told her that the next day, she could go with Hak to his ship. That night, after discussing with Yun, the next morning the group went to meet Ji-ha's captain. However, the captain wanted to test their abilities first, so she had her crew attack the group all at once. Hak and the 2 dragons easily passed the test. The captain then asked Yun what he could do. Although he couldn't fight, he was capable of many other things. As for Yona, it was different. She couldn't confidently say she was capable of anything. But the captain saw the determination in her eyes and decided to give her a different kind of trial, to gather something called Heaven's Blessing Herb. Everyone was surprised when they heard this. If it was difficult for them, then even more so for a princess. But it was the captain's order. Heaven's Blessing Herb was a rare medicinal plant that only grew on Cloudvale Cape. It had the ability to quickly heal wounds and illnesses and would be very useful in the coming battle. Yona did not hesitate to accept. There was one thing the captain hadn't said. The herb only grew in the middle of a steep cliff, and Yona would have to go alone without the help of the dragon warriors or Hak. Yona still firmly agreed. Ji-ha then led the way for her. He pointed out the path ahead. If Yona followed it downward, there would be a cave just the right size for her body, and the herb grew inside there. Regaining her composure, Yona began to move. Clinging to the cliff face, she slowly made her way down. A strong gust of wind startled her, making her legs freeze in fear. Shin-Ah's squirrel and Ji-ha were behind her, trying to calm her down. To be honest, even Ji-ha himself wasn't confident in gathering that herb, let alone a girl. However, the trembling princess before him now was very different from the one who had once made him kneel. He began to question whether Yona really was the master of the 4 dragons. Ji-ha called out, urging Yona to turn back. It was okay to fail, no one was forcing her, but Yona was determined not to go back. If she turned back now, it would be humiliating in front of everyone. She continued on, dragging her trembling feet forward. She said that being given this task was actually a blessing, because if in the upcoming battle the people she cared about were seriously injured, what she brought back could help them recover. That's why she had to pick it no matter what. Still, she was very afraid not only of the danger before her, but also of losing the people she loved. Although the captain had ordered her to go alone, Ji-ha had quietly followed her all along in case something went wrong. He didn't help, he just followed. After a certain point, Ji-ha couldn't follow anymore because the path became too narrow, and now Yona truly had to go on alone. As she moved forward, she tried to calm herself, and finally, she found the Heaven's Blessing Herb. She called out to Ji-ha to let him know. But suddenly a huge wave hit, sweeping her away. Ji-ha rushed forward to find her, and luckily, Yona was still clinging to a vine. Ji-ha tried to save her, but she refused his help, afraid of breaking her promise to the captain. Another wave came crashing in, so Ji-ha had no choice but to save Yona after all. Only the 2 of them knew, so it wouldn't matter. And besides, Ji-ha's principle was that if a young woman was in danger, he must help her. Hak and the others, worried about Yona, had come to the cliff to look for her. Seeing the height, Kai-ya became extremely anxious. They wanted to go down and save her, but the captain stopped them, saying that the princess was using the Heaven's Blessing Herb to earn her trust, and if they went down to rescue her now, wouldn't that be trampling on her determination? However, Shin-Ah had already spotted Yona returning from afar. Yun was overjoyed to see that Yona was safe. She gave the Heaven's Blessing Herb to the captain and confessed that she had failed the challenge because Ji-ha had saved her, so she wanted to do the challenge again. The captain was very pleased with Yona. Honestly, if Ji-ha hadn't saved Yona, she would have thrown him into the sea herself. The captain passed Yona on the trial. Hak was relieved that she was safe. Ji-ha asked Hak if taking care of Yona was so exhausting that he always looked like that. Hak said yes, And Jiha added that he himself had aged another year following and caring for Yona. However, Jiha often troubled himself over women, but Yona might be a special case, pure and stubborn, yet somehow someone had already thrown everything away just to protect her. Jiha asked Hak how far things had gone between him and Yona, but Hak simply replied that he was just protecting someone important. Jiha observed that even though the two were close, there was still distance between them. It felt like Hak didn't want to hold on to Yona. That evening, Hak thought about what Jiha had said. He saw Yona as a younger sister, protecting the land where Su-won and the princess once ruled. His entire life had been devoted to such an oath. Now, facing a princess who was struggling every day to survive, Hak simply upheld his vow to the king to protect her, and thus demanded nothing more. Hak then came to check on Yona's injured hands from harvesting the herb. He treated the thorn wounds with honey. As he applied the honey, Hak thought again of Jiha's words. He had crushed the desires inside himself so as not to go too far. Lost in thought, he spilled the honey. Without thinking much, he licked Yona's hand. The princess was startled and ran off. It seemed that deep inside, that desire still remained. That night, Yona spoke with the captain. She would disband the pirate crew after the battle was over, as she didn't want to lose loved ones and wished to live peacefully. She also asked Yona to take Jiha with her once everything was done. At that moment, Shin-ah noticed that many ships were gathering at the harbor, 7 in total, all armed. The captain gathered everyone to discuss a plan. She guessed the enemy had assembled such a force because of a major deal. The client this time was the Kai Empire, and the goods they were trafficking were people, mostly women and children. Not only that, but this time they also intended to wipe out the pirate crew completely. The captain marked a location for their surprise attack. The problem was when to strike, and which ship held the women and children. Surely the enemy would use them as hostages. The captain needed more information to come up with the most precise plan. They needed to destroy the scum who had harmed so many people once and for all. The next day, everyone rushed to prepare. Yona still hadn't been able to help much. She went around asking others, but everyone was busy with their tasks. Seeing that, the green dragon suggested she go explore the city. He carried her and soared into the sky. While flying, Jiha spotted the local lord. Whenever people saw his carriage, they would hide in their homes. From above, Yona saw a girl in disguise. When she approached to ask, she learned that the girl was hiding from the lord. A few days earlier, she had heard rumors of an easy job with high pay. So she and her friend had gone into a certain shop. Her friend, who was more attractive, was invited into a private room. After waiting for a while, the girl became worried and scared. When she peeked inside, her friend had already been taken away and never returned. Later, she found out that the shop belonged to the lord. Terrified that the guards might come after her, she had disguised herself. Jiha reassured the girl that her friend had only been kidnapped, so there was no need to worry. Returning with the information he had gathered, since he had discovered the place where people were being gathered for trafficking, Jiha investigated the shop the girl mentioned. According to one of the workers there, the shop would only be recruiting people until the afternoon of the day after tomorrow, which seemed to be their opportunity to strike. If there were quality merchandise, the lord would wait until the last minute. In short, the deal would take place on that day. Now, they needed to find a way to rescue the victims. Yona volunteered for the task. She would infiltrate the ship and send a signal to everyone. Hak and the others disagreed with her plan, saying that if she were discovered, she would be killed. However, she didn't have the time to search every ship, and their priority was to save people, not to defeat the lord. Yona persuaded everyone, and the captain agreed to let her carry out the plan. But to increase the chance of success, the captain insisted on sending one more person with her for support. Hak and Kaya both volunteered, but the traffickers only recruited attractive young women. Hak, Kaya, and even Jiha volunteered again, which gave the captain a headache. So she looked to Yun. Given his sharp instincts and knowledge of explosives, he was a perfect fit, and in this matter, Yun was confident that his appearance in disguise as a woman was attractive enough. With the plan finalized, they would carry it out the next day. That evening, Yona sat down for a talk with the captain, who reminded her to be careful once she boarded that ship. She would be considered the captain's daughter, and she would not allow anyone to lose their life. Yona hadn't had memories of her own mother for a long time. But while speaking with the captain, the woman gave her a feeling she could only describe as maternal. While walking around, Yona ran into Hack. As she walked past him, he held her back. He still couldn't accept that the princess was heading into danger. He just wanted to tie her up and keep her from going anywhere. Yona used to believe that the land ruled by her father was a peaceful and prosperous place. But throughout this journey, she had seen many regions still suffering under his rule. Yona didn't know whether her father's way of ruling had been right or not. But the events happening here also carried part of her responsibility. That's why she had to fight, so she asked to be allowed to go. Hack could only watch as Yona gradually faded into the darkness. Seeing the determined look on her face surprised him, and made him want to see the princess achieve success. The next day, Yona and Yun disguised themselves, and Kaiya along with Shin Ah's squirrel also dressed up to follow them. Seeing Yun's nervousness, Hack came to reassure him. Then the two of them went to the trafficking shop, were invited into a room, and then dropped through a trapdoor. Everyone outside waited for word from Yona and Yun. After falling into a pit, Yona was blindfolded and brought to a secret location. Both of them were taken to a room filled with other girls. Yona had sprained her ankle during the fall. A while later, the Lord arrived to inspect them. He approached Yona, noticing she stood out from the others, and planned to keep her for himself. Yun stepped forward to ask for her instead, but the Lord glanced at him and kicked him. When his own men tried to stop him, they were hit too. The Lord trampled on Yun while terrifying the other girls so they wouldn't try to escape. As he indulged in his cruelty, he suddenly felt a burning sensation in his hand. It was from Yona's fiery gaze. Looking closely, he realized he had seen her before. Fortunately, he didn't recognize her, since he had heard that she had been killed during Su-won's coup. Still, he said he would remember those eyes, then left. Yun swore to repay this debt. Some of the girls tried to escape, but one girl who had been there for 2 weeks stopped them, saying it was impossible. Her words only added to the others' despair, but Yona was different. In this dark place, she shone brightly, rekindling the will to live in everyone. That night was the night of the trade. Yona and Yun were blindfolded and taken away. Meanwhile, Hack was deeply worried, though at least he was better off than the white lizard. In truth, he too was very worried about Yona and Yun. Though they didn't show it, Jiha tried to act fine, but the others ganged up on him. Then Shin Ah spotted several ships beginning to move. The captain rallied everyone to prepare for departure. On Yona's side, Yun had summoned Shin Ah's squirrel to help untie him. Once free, he and Yona waited for the guard to come down and then took him out. Yona said she would rescue everyone, but in truth, she was more afraid than ever. Regaining her composure, Yona explained her plan to the girls again. Though her leg was still in great pain, she kept moving forward. Seeing the princess's courage, the older girl from before decided to follow and help her, and all the other girls united in agreement. The older girl's name was Yuri. Outside, Hack's group had begun to act. White Dragon fought, while yelling Yona's name. Blue Dragon still hadn't seen Yona's signal, and their enemies were increasing in number. But they were not allowed to kill according to the captain's orders. Green Dragon had to keep jumping between ships to support the crew. On Yun's side, he had lured 2 guards over to him so Yona and Yuri could push some crates down on them. However, a wave rocked the boat, allowing one of the guards to escape and take Yuri hostage. Yun was torn between using his fireworks to save her or to send a signal, since he had very few. If it had been the old Yun, he would have prioritized escaping. But after meeting that fool, Yun had changed. He removed his disguise and declared that he was a pirate. The remaining guard got up and attacked Yun, letting the guard hit him a bit. Yun then revealed that he had planted explosives on the ship, and only he knew their locations. With no other option, the 2 guards dragged Yun off to search for the mines, warning that if there were none, they would kill him as an example. As soon as one of them left, Yona sprang up, grabbed the bag containing her bow, and ran out. When the remaining guard tried to chase her, Yuri knocked him on the head. Yun was exposed for lying and was about to be executed. When Yona appeared, the enemies scoffed at what a weak girl like her could possibly do, but looked closely. Her eyes were like a second sun, burning through their rotten hearts and making them flinch. Taking advantage of the moment, Yona rushed forward, grabbed the fireworks from Yun, and fired them into the sky. Blue Dragon saw the signal. Even though they now knew the location, Hack was too far away to help. The only one who could make it was Green Dragon. Just as the enemies were about to kill Yona, Green Dragon charged in, and with a few swift moves, sent them flying. Yona and Yun were relieved that the plan had succeeded. At that moment, the Lord's reinforcements arrived. But Blue Dragon came in to assist Green Dragon. Hack and White Dragon stayed behind to continue supporting the others. Once everything was under control, their remaining task was to capture the Lord. Hack and White Dragon kept striking down enemy ships one by one, and several crew members came to support Green Dragon. As for the Lord, he had received the information and decided to personally join the fight to protect the empire he had spent over 30 years building. Yun had identified the Lord's location. It was on the ship where Green and Blue Dragon were stationed. Given the unusually high number of soldiers there, Blue Dragon went in first and was nearly ambushed but managed to handle it. When he entered the ship, the Lord had already fled, planning to return to his residence, rebuild his forces, and launch a counterattack on Yona's group. While he was gloating, Blue Dragon discovered his location. Green Dragon immediately launched himself toward the target. The Lord drew his bow and shot an arrow, which struck Green Dragon in the shoulder. Breaking his wing, the Lord readied another arrow to finish him off. But then, that same burning feeling returned and filled him with terror. So he hadn't been mistaken back then. The girl with the fiery red hair from the capital. There she was again, in that fleeting instant. The girl whose crimson hair reflected the sunlight. Princess Yona fired an arrow straight through his heart, ending the sinful life of a corrupt lord. The final battle was over. Everyone returned to port, reuniting the rescued victims with their families. Seeing Yona and Yun covered in injuries, Hack and White Dragon were enraged and stormed the remaining traffickers. The captain declared victory and told everyone to celebrate with a feast. They all joyfully celebrated together, while Yona wandered the city. Unexpectedly, she encountered Su-won. He was overjoyed to see that she was alive, admitting he had been shocked by the news of her death, but was glad she was here now. Yona, however, was still haunted by the memory of Su-won killing her father. Suddenly, Su-won embraced her. It turned out his men were nearby, so he had to hide her. Inside, she wanted to use the dagger at Su-won's side to strike him down, but he stopped her. After dismissing his soldiers, Su-won told her he understood that she wanted to kill him, but he asked for her forgiveness, saying now was not the time, as he still had things he needed to do. Once everything was finished, he said she could do whatever she wanted. After saying those words, Su-won left. Hack was looking for Yona. When he heard her crying, he ran over, took one look at the situation, and could already guess what had happened. When Yona returned, she tried to act cheerful to cover up her true feelings, but everyone could tell something was wrong. Even while eating with the group, she spilled her food without noticing, and she even changed clothes right there in front of everyone. Hack had to intervene before she ran inside to change properly, and he even demanded money from anyone who had seen the princess. Green Dragon came to find Hack, having noticed that Hack usually didn't bring his spear into the city, so clearly something was wrong. While changing, Yona still had the hairpin Su-won had given her. So many things had happened since she left the palace. That afternoon, she and Hack sat together watching the sea. Yona decided she would leave the port city and asked if he wanted to come with her. Of course, he had to follow the princess like her shadow. Everyone behind them was eavesdropping on the conversation. She decided they would leave the next morning. That evening, everyone held another feast. Green Dragon sat alone, playing his instrument on a cliff. Yona came to find him and praised his playing. When she tried to play it herself, it sounded like an ox stepping on a broken string. The two sat and talked for a while. Later, Green Dragon went to find his comrades, those who had fought alongside him through countless battles, to say goodbye, because tonight, they would all likely begin a new life. After that, he went to see the captain. They reminisced about old times and talked about Green Dragon's decision. Following Yona would be a difficult path, but maybe that was the destiny of a dragon like him. Still, he couldn't feel at ease letting Yona out of his sight, even though she had no power. Even though she walked forward while crying, he had been consumed by her radiance. The next day, they all set off together. The captain and the others gave Yona plenty of advice and also handed her some heavenly herb. She hugged the captain like a farewell to a mother figure. Then they departed. While traveling, Blue Dragon spotted Green Dragon, who had secretly joined the group, so he forced him to reveal himself. And so, their group gained a new member. Throughout the journey, thanks to Green Dragon's hunting skills, their meals improved significantly. Now, only one dragon remained, the Yellow Dragon, so Green Dragon volunteered to find him. But the other dragons argued, saying it was their mission too. The three bickered, so Hack and Yun went off to process the deer that Green Dragon had caught. Yona herself butchered it. Back when she was in the palace, she had never imagined taking the life of an animal. Avoiding it would be like turning a blind eye to its life. As she prayed for the animal, a man suddenly appeared beside her. He agreed with her view, but said that all beings are equal, and so one day they will all reach paradise. As he spoke, his stomach growled and drool dripped from his mouth. He excused himself by saying he was just a passerby, so she shouldn't mind him. Seeing that he was clearly hungry, Yona invited him to stay. Hack, Yona, and Yun grilled meat together. Hack didn't care who the guy was, and the other dragons were probably still busy arguing. As they ate, they talked about the Yellow Dragon. According to the founding myths, he possessed a powerful body. When the other dragons returned, they were quite shocked. The man eating in front of them was the Yellow Dragon. His name was Zeno, a wanderer who loved traveling and having fun. All three dragons could feel that he was the one. The only strange thing was that Yellow Dragon didn't feel the burning sensation when meeting Yona. Unlike the others, no one knew if he was strong or just a fool. Before Yona could even invite him to join, he had already agreed. As mentioned, Yellow Dragon liked wandering and fun, so since he had free time, he just went along with them. Part of the reason was also because Yun's cooking was delicious. White Dragon still found it hard to believe and asked Yellow Dragon to prove his strength. According to him, his body was incredibly durable, but Hack knocked him out with a single punch. Yun noted that Yellow Dragon's skin was smoother than Yona's. Compared to him, if Hack said he was the Yellow Dragon, people would believe it more. Realizing his secret had been exposed, Hack joked that he was the Yellow Dragon. White Dragon replied that if Hack were a real dragon, he'd have to be the ultra-evil supervillain Dark Dragon. But honestly, that sounded kind of cool too. Either way, White Dragon was really happy that the four dragons had finally gathered. Yun looked happy too, but the simplicity of it all had overshadowed its depth. That night, Yellow Dragon came to find Yona. He helped her gather firewood. Yona told him that even if others didn't believe he was the Yellow Dragon, she still did, because through her eyes, the air around him felt different from an ordinary person, just like a warm, golden beam of sunlight. Even though they had only just met, being near Yellow Dragon gave Yona a sense of warmth, and she reintroduced herself formally, saying she was honored to meet Yellow Dragon Zeno. Later, Yun calculated everything again. When night blankets everything, the blood of the dragons will be reborn once more. According to the ancient covenant, at the moment the four dragons gather, the sword and shield that protect the king will awaken. And finally, the Crimson Dragon will return at dawn. Yun had figured out the group's next direction. A few days later, they returned to find Iksu. As soon as they entered the house, everything was in chaos, and the priest was lying in one spot with his head covered in blood. After questioning him, they learned that he had made a mess because he was too hungry. Yun then scolded Iksu thoroughly. Just by looking, Iksu could tell that Yona had experienced many things. Yun asked about the divine prophecy, and Iksu said they still needed some more time before the sword and shield to protect the king would appear. When that time came, Yona would surely know what to do. At that point, Yellow Dragon finally spoke. That was Yona's goal in gathering the four dragons. In short, since Hack and Yona had fled from the royal palace, they needed the strength of the four dragons to survive. But what would come after that? Would they keep running forever or overthrow Suwon and reclaim the throne? With the power of the four dragons, taking back the palace would be easier than eating cake. But Zeno said he wouldn't participate because he wasn't capable of fighting anyone. Either way, Yellow Dragon thought Yona should think about that purpose before the moment Iksu spoke of arrived. Everyone decided to stay there for now. That afternoon, the three dragon warriors and Hack sat down to discuss things. avenging her father and overthrowing Su-won aside. If Yona did reclaim the throne, what would she do then? It was hard to expect much from a 16-year-old girl. At the mention of Su-won, Hak left. That night, Ik-su and Yona talked in front of the waterfall. After everything she had been through, her father had loved peace. But the kingdom had not been happy. The more she learned, the weaker she felt. But even so, in moments of despair, there were always people there to help her. She wasn't strong enough to lift herself up. But the people behind her had reached out their hands to support her. There were still many people in this country she needed to protect. She didn't regret shooting down that corrupt lord. She kept asking herself if there were still more scoundrels like him in this kingdom. That's why, from now on, she wanted to do great things. She would save the unfortunate people of Kuka Kingdom. She apologized to her father for going against his wishes and using weapons. Before returning to the royal palace, she still had things she needed to do. She also told Ik-su about meeting Su-won. She hated him, but couldn't draw her sword to stab him. Ik-su said that no matter how foolish or confusing it might be, there are still feelings that can never be erased. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, Yona was still training in the rain. Hak came to find her, worried she might catch a cold. The two of them took shelter in a cave. Yona knew Hak was still upset that she held a sword. He said he wasn't angry, just worried about her. But Yona didn't want to use Hak as her shield. She needed to be stronger. Previously, Yona had asked Green Dragon to teach her the sword because Hak refused to. But Green Dragon, like Hak, didn't want her to face danger. Green Dragon thought the reason Hak didn't want her to wield a sword was because he wanted her to be safer and happier than anyone else. He also jokingly said that Hak wanted to tie Yona up and hide her so no other man could ever see her. Before he could add that Hak was a possessive guy, Yun had already called him away. Yona thought Green Dragon was just joking. Hak said it was the opposite. He only wanted everyone in the palace to see her strength. One day, he would tell them, "Look, this is the girl you cast out of the palace, Princess Yona, the one who cut her hair and took up a sword. The one who lived stronger than anyone else to protect this land." That's what he would say. Yona was very happy and fell asleep beside Hak. And he kissed the princess on her forehead. The anime ends here. Farewell. Spoiler. In the manga, Hak proposes to Yona.